We all know about Gabriel flying in through the window to tell Mary the news. I think she passed out. But he stayed with her, laid his hands on, talked her through it, convinced her she could do it, maybe, or simply that she had no choice. But no one talks about an angel coming to Joseph. That's because there was no angel. It was just Mary that told him, and she was no angel. In fact, Joseph's mother and others had raised some questions about her parentage. Not the kind of family. Now, Joseph didn't go for those angelic types. Not the good girl Marys who were quiet and wait on you hand and foot. It was more the Mary and Martha type of Marys that got his attention, and this particular Mary who rarely missed those late night strategy sessions around Sam's kitchen table. But as Joseph neared his 5th decade, he realized he'd never have a child, never get married. It was actually a relief. Even his mother had finally quit it with the hints, the surprise meetings with her friend's spinster niece at the market. Joseph didn't need to leave his mark on the world in that way. Not when you have the satisfaction of smooth wood under your fingertips, the precision of joinery, the systematic progress from foundation to rooftop. And those late nights at Sam's gave him a sense of something larger. Even though Sam was always harping on about his messianic visions, Joseph knew that strengthening the guild, those incremental increases in a day's wages, insisting that a man could choose freely which work to engage, stopping to observe the Sabbath no matter how the Goyim carried on about their deadlines. Sam wouldn't let up about some Messiah being on the way, but how could a Jewish visionary even live long enough to get anything done? Surely he'd be crucified like so many already. Still, the messianic hoopla mixed freely in those late-night conversations, and it was part of the coming together. The solidarity, even across the trades, as they realized their brotherhood surpassed all illusion of competition. Not just a more united front against the Roman dogs, but something different than what those fancy Talmudic scholars expounded. The 99%, they knew something. Hard to put a finger on what it was, but it came from listening to the wood, the well, the donkey, and the cobbles under hoof. So when Joseph realized how disappointed he'd be the nights Mary failed to show, or he wondered all day what she might think of his latest attempt to engage the stonemasons, he realized something was different. And even more surprising, how this smooth-skinned woman so full of flesh, her eyes would seek him out in the corner. How she'd twinkle her remarks in his direction. My God, is this what you intend for me? Their engagement was marked by no ring, no party, just him asking so humbly and her saying yes. In terms of a wedding date, they deferred to his mother's request for springtime. Mary was certainly not the daughter-in-law she'd have chosen even before she'd given up, and her son's foolishness might not last so long, or Mary's pretense of loyalty. No proper woman stayed up late in a room full of men or meddled in affairs beyond her realm. By springtime, her true colors would show. There'd be a chance for saving face. So it was no angel who broke the news to Joseph. Mary's body spoke, as it so often would, but this time in a new language. They'd all been a little queasy that month. It seems the lamb stew at Sam's had been too long in the pot. But as the days passed, Mary could still barely keep anything down. Joseph brought her broth from his mother's, and she sipped at it as best she could. As her strength returned, the cravings began. First pomegranate, and then that day on the road, a cherry tree of all things. She had to have some. Awkward, since they were already late for the gathering, the one where a few masons had promised to show. Really, Mary, the branches are so high. I don't have my ladder here with me on this road. Can we please just keep going? And then she burst into tears. He'd never seen her cry. He hadn't thought of her like that. And then she told him, well, what do you expect? No man's going to take that news gracefully. How could he? After all these years of watching other men fall and descend into the drama and the fighting and the hot-blooded mess, then the children and more children. Yes, he'd seen the joy in that, but also the hunger. traveling wider for more work to feed more mouths, his friends growing older before his eyes. It was why so many had lost sight of the cause, their lives narrowing down, stooping to shoulder it all. And then after all this, him too, finally giving in to what God had in mind, the particulars of the way his body and hers were made to make more bodies, the endless chain of flesh, him not exempt after all, lineage in the basest sense. He had submitted to this, the power of her presence, irradiating his plans. And now, just as his mother had predicted, she throws it all back in his face, that thing he'd never really wanted anyway. She dangled it there until he bit, hooked. Now he sees it only was bait. But she's there, in front of him, crying, by the side of the road, the cherries high overhead, telling him about the angel at the window. Clouds moving quickly. Suddenly he knows that plans are what you make so God can laugh. Suddenly he doesn't care who it was that might have taken her home or slipped something in her wine. This damn angel at the window. Suddenly he still loves her no matter what. And this child, this puffiness under her dress, this fullness of her breasts, this glow in her face, it is a miracle. Already he's acquiescing to the crazy name she'll be choosing. She's sure it's a boy. Not something from scripture, no Samuel or Isaac. Some crazy name like Jesus. Probably she heard it from those guitar-playing Spaniards. Suddenly, Joseph becomes the man who can accept everything. God knows his family genes aren't the be-all and end-all. Maybe the child can escape the forward-thrusting neck of his father, the nervous rolling of thumbs against forefingers or chewing on the tongue. Maybe this child will be exempt from the family chain of worry or tall enough to really play basketball. Suddenly he's there at the doorway alongside every anxious, blue-eyed father who wonders about his brown-eyed son, or the dark-haired man whose bald baby girl's hair comes in blonde, looking so much like his brother, or the baby born a few weeks too early when you count the months he'd been afield with the sheep last spring. How often they do love anyway. So Joseph stood around there with Mary, the side of the road. Some coins found their way out of his pocket into the nimble hand of the climbing urchin who showered cherries down into her laughing cloak, and Mary's lips and fingers were stained with the dark red juice. There would be no black eye, no bruises on her belly, no red letter A. He stood around where she was until she'd eaten her fill, and they went on down the road together, more late than ever, more in love, more tiny, in a world whose growing wonder could open doors wider than he'd ever imagined, rolling back the stone at the tomb of hope.